Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Hope you guys are all doing fine. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to create this beautiful skirt. First and foremost, I'll show you how to create that A-line effect. Then I'll show you how to sew the zip and create the slits in front. And then finally, I will show you how to snatch the waist to have that pencil-like effect that you can see on the skirt. So right here, I have 1.5 yards of fabric. I'm using a crepe fabric for this, so I just place my fabric on fold and the length and width of the fabric is as shown. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be drawing a straight line from the edge of the fabric just to have 1/2 inch for sewing allowance. So after that, from this point now, I'll just go ahead and mark my hip line measurements, but because we are using a band for this, I'll be minusing 1.5 inch from my measurements. So I'll place my tape rule from that 1/2 inch. I'll make sure that it's 1.5 inch on that point, and I'll go ahead and mark my hip line measurements, which is 8.5. So I'll do the same thing on the other side of the fabric as well, making sure that my tape rule is 1.5 on that 1/2 inch point. Then I'll go ahead and mark. I'm using 1.5 because that's the width of the band that I want to use for the skirt. So after that, the next thing I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and mark the length of the skirt. I'm using 34 for this skirt plus the extra 1.5 inch, so everything is 34 inches that I'm using for the skirt. So on this line now, I'll just go ahead and mark 1/4 of my waist measurements, and I'll add 1 inch for zip. Remember, there will be a zip in front, and this one that we are cutting now is for the front, so I'll just add 1 inch for the zip, and I'll go ahead and add another 1 inch for the sewing allowance for the skirt. So after that, on the hip line, I'll mark 1/4 of my hip measurements. Since I want the hip line to be free, I will just add 1/2 inch extra plus 1 inch for the zip and then 1 inch for the sewing allowance. So after that, I'll just go ahead and draw a straight line connecting the hip line to the waistline like so. So by the time you're done, the next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to determine where I want the slit to start from. So from my waistline, I want it to be about 20 inches away from my waistline. Hers is way shorter than mine. If you notice, her own zip line stops about 17 inches away from the waistline, but I'm using 20 inches for mine, so you just depend on what you want. So I'll just go ahead and mark the 20 inches, and I'll draw a straight line on it like so. While for the length of the skirt, which is the ending part of the fabric, I'll just go ahead and mark 16 inches for that A-line effect that you can see on the skirt. So you can increase it by 2, like maybe you mark 18 inches or more, depending on how full you want that A-line to be. So I use 16 inches because I'm managing my fabric and I just want to use 16 inches because I think it's okay. So I'll just go ahead and mark it like so, connecting the hip line all the way to the 16 inches points that we marked earlier. So after that, I'm done creating the A-line effect. I'll just go ahead and cut it out like so. So when you're done cutting, I'll just go ahead and notch the hip line so that when you're joining it to the back, you know exactly where to join it to. So by the time I'm done, I'm just going to open it up, and this is what it looks like. So at this point, I'm just going to be creating that zipper that you can see in front. And in order to do that, I'll be dividing my nipple to nipple measurement by 2. So my nipple to nipple measurement is 7, dividing it by 2, that is 3.5. So from the midpoint of the waistline, I'm going to be marking my 3.5 plus extra 1/2 inch for the sewing allowance. So I'll be marking 4 inches away from the midpoint of the skirt. While on the hip line, I'll also do the same thing. From the midpoint, I'll just go ahead and mark 4 inches away from it like so. and I'll do the same thing for where I want the slits to start from, and also for the length of the dress. I'll just go ahead and use a straight rule to connect it from the waistline all the way down to the hemline. So for the hemline as well, I went in by 4 inch, and I went ahead to connect it. So at this point, I'll just go ahead and cut it out like so. So I'll cut it from the hemline all the way to the waistline like so. So by the time you open it up, this is what it looks like. So one is bigger than the other one. So you decide which side will be bigger and which side will be smaller. Okay. So for the part that is bigger, because we are not adding any zip to the other side, we're only adding it to one side. And remember, we added 1 inch for zip on fold. So at this point, I'll just go ahead and remove the extra 1 inch on the other side. That is the bigger part of the front skirt. That is the side that is bigger compared to the other side. So I'll just go ahead and mark 1 inch from the waistline all the way down to the hemline. So after you're done, the next thing now is to draft for the back. So in order to do that, I have another piece of fabric that is the same length and width as the first one, and is also on fold, and I've gone ahead to draw a straight line for the zipper, for the sewing allowance. So from that straight line, I'll mark 1.5 inch away, and I'll go ahead to mark my hip line measurement. Just like we did in front, we are repeating the same thing for the back. So for the waist measurement, quarter of your waist measurements, you mark it there plus 1 inch for sewing allowance. And since there's no zip at the back, I will not be adding any allowance for the back. So for the hip line, I'll go ahead and mark quarter of my hip measurements plus 1 inch for sewing allowance, and extra half an inch for ease at that hip line point. And then while for the length of the dress, I'll go ahead and mark 16 inches, just like we marked for the front. I'm doing the same thing for the back as well. And then by the time you're done, you just go ahead and connect from the hip line all the way down to the hemline like so. After drawing it out, you go ahead and cut it out like so. So by the time you're done cutting, the next thing now is to cut the band. So the width of the and length of the band is as shown. So the length of the band is dependent on your waist size. So my waist size is 26 inches. Dividing it by 2, that is about 12.5. So this band is 15 inches long, which is more than enough for what I need it for. So I'll just go ahead and place it on fold like so, and this is what it looks like. So at this point, this is the front. I've gone ahead to weave it, although I didn't use a matching thread for this and I ended up regretting it. So if you are weaving, please use a matching thread for a better work. Then at this point, I'll go ahead and attach the zip. So in order to attach the zip, I'm going to be arranging the smaller size, the smaller piece together with the bigger piece. So at this point, I'll just place my zip facing the right side of the zip to the right side of the skirt. So as you can see, I'm facing it together like so, and I'll go ahead and sew using the half an inch sewing allowance so that it will be very close to the zipper points. So I'll do the same thing for the other side as well, facing right side together, and I'll sew. So another way you can do this is, if the zip is too long, you can start from the end part of the zip. You can start joining from that point, and then you cut the excess from where it stops. You are going to cut off the excess. So at this point, I'm done sewing, and this is what it looks like. I've attached the zip to the bigger piece of the skirt. So now I'm attaching the zip to the smaller piece of the skirt. So in order to do this, at this point, I was trying to figure out which one is the left and which one is the right. So that was why I was a little bit confused. So make sure you mark your fabric before you cut. So after that, I'm just going to place my zip to the other side of the skirt, and I'll go ahead and sew. So after sewing very close to the edge of the zip, this is what it should look like, a very clean work. So when you open it up, this is what it should look like. So at this point, I'll go ahead and cut off the excess. I use the second method, and I'm cutting off the excess from it. So if you can buy the exact length of the zip, it will do you a lot of good. Instead of just cutting it halfway like that, it will be difficult for you to close it at the slit points. So just get the exact zip that you need for this, or you do as I'm doing right now. So at this point, I'm just going to open it up by 1/2 inch. Remember, we are using 1/2 inch on both sides as the zipper allowance. So after using 1/2 inch, I'll just go ahead and notch it open, and I'll turn the zip facing it like so, and I'll sew on it. It's just like sewing any normal zip. Okay, so you just fold in the excess like so, and you sew on it. So at this point, for the slit point, I'll go ahead and fold it also, and I'll sew very close to the ending part of this of the slit that is very close to the edge of the fabric. So at this point, I've attached the zip to it, and I've also gone ahead to hem the skirts of this. I've also gone ahead to hem the skirt. So if you notice, the hemming that I did for the slit point is very tiny, you can barely see it. So that's what it should look like. So for the band, I'll just place my front fabric on facing the right side, facing the wrong side to the right side of the fabric. I'll go ahead and sew, and after sewing, I'll turn it to the right side, and I'll fold it in like so, and I'll go ahead and sew very close to the edge of it using 0.25 inch sewing allowance. So by the time you're done sewing for both the back and the front, the back, you don't need to do too much. Okay, just attach the band and you are good to go. So by the time you attach the band to the skirt, you're just going to be joining the front to the back at the side seam. So when you are joining, add, remember we left 1 inch for sewing allowance, but for the band, use 1.25 inch for sewing allowance, so that you can be able to snatch the waist a little bit, just enough for you to be able to wear your zip in it. Okay, so just use 1.25 inch, and then you sew from the waistline all the way down to the hip line, and then down to the length of the skirt. So at this point, I've attached the band to the skirt. We don't have light, that's why it's looking rumpled like this. I did not iron it before sewing, so if you have the opportunity, please go ahead and iron it. You can even use interfacing, hair stay to iron it, so that you can have a clean finish. And then at this point, that opening that is right there, I'll just go ahead and attach an invincible zipper to the dress. So I'll just attach invincible zipper just the way you attach zip to any dress. That's the way you will be attaching this one as well. So at this point, I was done sewing, and this is what it looks like. So just like I said, make sure that the band, instead of 1 inch, we're using 1.25 inch, so that you can be able to create that slant from that top of the band to the down part of the band. So you can see the slant there. So at the down part of the band, it's maintaining the 1 inch. So you just connect from that point all the way down to the hemline of the skirt. So I did the same thing for the zip as well. While I was attaching the zip, I made sure that the band, I used 1.25 inch as sewing allowance instead of 1 inch as sewing allowance. So after this is what it looks like. I'll just go ahead and turn it to the right side so that it says exactly what I'm talking about. And that will be all for today's video. Please remember to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. I'll be showing you how to sew the top soon, so stay tuned.